Hey there, welcome to day 28 of our time together going through Hey You. We have come a long way so far. We just have a few days left. But whether this is your first day here, your first time with me, or this is day 28 of your time with me, or you you caught a few days here and there, and today is one of the days you catch, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're here. We just have a few more days to go. We're going up to 31 days. And if you are like me and this month is 30 days long, on day 30 and 31, day 30, put day 30 and 31 together and just do them both at the same time, okay? Get one big day. That's it. And that's how we'll close the month. But today's title is Let Patience Have Its Perfect Work. The note says, Hey you, how can your home be modeled after kingdom so that it makes knowing God easier for your children? He knows what you need and what you are asking for. What seems like a delay is actually His timing. Everything you have been asking and waiting for, will come when it is time. And I'm just going to read this first part. It says, James 1:3-4 tells us to let patience have her perfect work so that we will be entire and complete, lacking nothing. That entire and complete doesn't just apply to us, but it applies to all of the circumstances surrounding what we are being patient for. At the time of this note, I was thinking about the home that I wanted to have and the environment I wanted to create for my family. The delay part has been a part of my vocabulary concerning timing, but oftentimes I think we give delays more credit than they should have. And when you have a certain time frame in mind of when something should happen by, it can be easy to say that when it doesn't meet that time frame, that something has been delayed, or that something got missed, or something's out of timing. And, well, that could be true. That could be true. Oftentimes, our set time, what we look at delay is just God's timing not matching up with ours. So talk about Abraham and Sarah. And yesterday, we spent the day talking about promises and how there are things that God has told us, but while we're in this waiting period, waiting for God to fulfill it, there are things that we can do as we wait. And talked about Abraham and Sarah and how they got ahead of God in their promised time, but this was part of the reason, because they thought that God had forgotten, or they thought that He was delayed, or they just thought they had to take it into their own hands. And when we are trying to pursue the promise that God has given us that way, the timing aspect is always going to be dictated by us. And when we don't see things happen in a certain time frame, we can get frustrated or, down, distressed, live with a lot of tension because what we thought would happen by a certain time didn't happen. And in this note, talk about how even with Elizabeth and Zechariah, when they were waiting for a child, it says that they were old in age, and when they did have a child, that child was John the Baptist. And if they had had a child, just to have a child, or in the time frame that they were looking for it, John the Baptist would have been born in the wrong generation or in the wrong time frame, when he was supposed to be the one that prepared the way for the Lord. So his birth had a timing attached to it, and even though it didn't match man's timeline for it, God was not delayed. It looks like delay, but it's just God has a perspective that we more than often do not have. He can see the scope of what's now He can see the scope of what will be. And oftentimes us thinking that our promise is going to be for us and for, for something that will benefit us, something that we're excited about, we forget that things need to happen in seasons or in different timings because they're part of something that we can't see. Like, for your child, if you're waiting on a child, then that child can't be born just because you want them to be born in a certain time frame. Like, that child has destiny and purpose attached to them. And so even the day that they're born, and that affects like who's around them when they're born, the generation that they're born in, the purpose that they carry, like that, we want a child, but there's so much beyond us having that child that that is relevant to what happens when we do receive the promise. So like Hannah and Samuel, like Hannah cried out to the Lord, and when Samuel was born and all the impact that Samuel had, like those things, like we can only see our desires and what we want fulfilled, what we want to happen, but God sees the scope of things and the lives that will be impacted, the generations that will be impacted based on what we receive and when. And so I do understand that it can feel like delay, and that it feels like God's just taking his sweet time on some things, and the sayings about he may not come when you want him, but he's always right on time, or God comes in the 11th hour. Well, those are very real. But I think us understanding that like God sees and he knows what our desires are, and for many of us, he's asking. I think for all of us at different stages of our lives, he's asking, I will give this thing to you. Will you allow me to do it in the timing that I have set for it? Because more depends on it than you know. And if we could, I understand having desires that you want in a certain time frame. And I don't know how long you've been waiting for what it is that you've been waiting for. But if we can know that God is not unaware of the desires that he's placed on the inside of us, but he wants us to just understand that our desires, even our desires, have a purpose to them. And our desires having a purpose equates to that purpose having a timing. And Ecclesiastes 3, that to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. If we can let our desires not just be desires, but desires that are actually desires that belong to purpose, then we understand that God is carrying that purpose in timing. And even if it doesn't come when we're looking for it, it will come when it's supposed to. So I hope that makes sense. The scripture for today comes from 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 9a. It says, but you must not forget this one thing, dear friends. A day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is like a day. The Lord isn't really being slow about his promise, as some people think. No, he is being patient for your sake. So what it is attached, and I remember doing the math on this, about how much, like even in prayer, like because a day is as 1,000 years to the Lord, like how much would if we prayed for an hour, how much would that be? And ends up being like 40 years or something. Somebody leave it in the comments. But just our timing is not like God's. And if we could just surrender what our desires are to understanding that they're part of a purpose, then we can surrender our purpose, that purpose, to God's timing and allow him to fulfill it in his timing. I hope that makes sense. I know it's not super easy. That I get. And again, I don't know how long you've been waiting, but I do know that God can be trusted. So if you've been waiting a long time, I think it is more evidence that there's a specificness either to the story that you'll have, or the evidence of what you carried and what you are carrying, of just the impact that it'll have because of the timing, because you waited. So that is it for today. Tomorrow we will meet for day 29 and talk about being carriers of hope. So I'll see you then.